Transponder is a web podcast about transgender issues as seen by two transitioning adults who, after a year of transition, wish to share their experiences and thoughts about gender issues, transition, and everyday life.
Hello, and welcome to Transponder 8. So in this one, we're going to interview Maddie Blaustein, who is a veteran of comic books, cartoon voices, and is a stand-up comedian, and a bunch of other stuff. Okay, so we're sitting down with Maddie Blaustein, and who is probably best known for doing voiceover work, right?
Yeah, that would be what I'm most known for.
Do you want to give us a little information about yourself?
Oh God, where would I start?
So how did you get into doing voice work?
Well, voice work I had done, even when I was a little kid. But how I got into it professionally, it's just something I've always been handy with. One interesting facet of it is the reason I started doing voiceovers even as a kid was I was fascinated by the Bugs Bunny cartoons when I was a kid because it said at the start, voice characterizations by Mel Blanc. And I thought that meant he did all the voices, the women too. And when I was a kid, I was very attuned to the fact, though I didn't have words for it, that I was transgendered. And I thought, wow, how cool, this guy can do, even women's voices. So I kind of had a no-limits attitude towards doing voices when I was a kid. And it gave me some gratification that, I was able to, how do I put this, have some kind of outlet for my feminine side.
Right.
And then I found out later, of course, that it wasn't Mel Blanc doing all the voices. He only did some of them, and the woman who did the voices was June Foray. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so I was always very facile with the voices, and sometime in my mid-20s, I decided to try and get work doing voiceovers, and it was slow at first, and then, eventually you get better and better parts, and so eventually I ended up on Pokemon, and that was a hoot.
Yeah, that's probably one of the ones you're most known for, right? Is the Pokemon?
Yeah, I'm most known. I'm most known as being Meowth on Pokemon.
Right.
Yeah, I see a lot of compliments of your work based on the ability to have a large range, getting the really high tones and the really low tones.
Yeah, well, it's funny because, when I was struggling so hard to live up to being male, because there was a high pressure on that in my family, this is my natural speaking voice. When I would try to affect a more masculine voice, I often got laryngitis about 4 times a year. And I would pitch my voice, way down.
Oh, that's pretty low.
Wow.
Yeah. But, it was wreaking havoc on my throat.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, did you start doing voice work before or after you transitioned?
Well, my transition lasted for a considerable amount of time. So, yeah, I was doing voiceover work prior to transition, but I was actually in mid-transition when I was cast on Pokemon, and I was out to everybody but the people who were producing Pokemon. So the early credits have me listed as Adam Blaustein,
right,
even though I was still living as Madeline at the time, and, well into my transition, and so when I would go do voiceovers, I actually used to go bind my chest and, try and look somewhat more androgynous. Eventually I got sick of that by about the end of the first year of that. And I just, I told the people at 4Kids, the producers of Pokemon, I said, look, I can't do this anymore. This is like a big honkin' lie. Because, I had transitioned originally back when I wrote Death Wish from Milestone Comics.
Which is how we were kind of introduced to your work in the first place.
Well, I should probably go ahead and tell you that story. See, I am a huge fan of Bruce Timm, who did the Justice League cartoon.
Uh-huh.
So we went to WonderCon, and we sat in on a panel of the writers and producer and such for the television show of Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. And one of the storyboard artists, Matt Wayne, is a big fan of Mila's uncle, who did comic books in the 1950s.
Right.
And so he told Mila about you. And I guess, we were pretty early in our transition when we first met him, and he spotted, he clocked us right away. And so he shared that information and told us about Death Wish, and that's how we found about you and about your voice work and such. So,
how did you finally get copies of it?
Oh, Death Wish is actually available on the Milestone site. They still have
really?
Yeah, you can order copies.
You can back order the copies.
Oh, I'll have to order some.
There you go.
Either that or email Dwayne. I didn't know that they offered back issues.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was really brilliant reading it now, even though it was written, way back was it the 80s or early 90s? What was the date on that?
That was written back in 94.
Yeah.
Yeah, early 90s.
I think 94.
I think at the time that was released, I can't think of any other comics that were out that had a transgender character actively in the role. As one of the main characters. So I think that really influenced me, being that I personally do comic book art. Or at least at one point had tried to get into the comic industry. So it's very inspirational.
Well, it's out there much more than it was when I wrote Death Wish. That's for sure.
Yeah.
When I wrote Death Wish, it was really very controversial. People were quite taken aback that I would do that. And in a large way, it was my effort to out myself to the comic book industry, which I'd been a part of for a good, 12 years at that point. So that was like a big deal for me because if you've read the editorials in the back of the issues, I actually come out in print in the third issue.
Yeah, I saw that. It was really neat.
So, did you have trouble pitching this idea, or were they pretty receptive to?
No. At the time, I was living in California. I'd just been through a messy divorce, and so I was out of work. I was looking for anything I could find, and it just happened that Dwayne McDuffie called me because he had started Milestone Comics, and he was looking for people to work there. And he asked me if I had any ideas for a miniseries. And I had remembered his character of Death Wish, who had appeared in Hardware previously. And I said, I'd like to write my own take on Silence of the Lambs using Death Wish, but I want the police detective to be a preoperative transsexual. And he immediately said, yeah, do it.
Wow.
And so, and Dwayne's a very courageous publisher.
Right.
So, he went for it, and, out of anything I've ever written in the comic book world, I'm the most proud of Death Wish.
Yeah, I think it was...
Bar none.
Wow, it was really good. So, when you came out to the comic book industry, were you intending to be non-stealth and to be completely out to the rest of the world, or is that something that just kind of came upon you?
No, it was always my intention to be out. I didn't see a point in, I had... The frame of mind that I was in at the time of coming out, and I still am in this frame of mind, is, and I hold no judgment against those girls who live stealth. I really don't. But it's just not for me, because I had felt that I had been hiding my entire life, and I didn't want to go from one form of hiding to yet another form of hiding.
Yeah. It's kind of like trading one fear for another.
Exactly. So, I mean, whereas previously the fear would have been that I was transsexual, well, then it's the same fear yet again. If you're living a stealth existence, the same fear is that you'll be outed as a transsexual. And I was like, well, no, this is about me not being afraid anymore.
And you're kind of, and if it's discovered, you're kind of sending the message that it was something to be ashamed of, and.
Well, exactly, because it's not.
Right. And, I think it's really courageous because you do take a big risk in your career. And even though
the comic book world is really very much a boys' network,
right.
and I'll even say that I don't think it helped my career, because after Death Wish, I got to do some more stuff for Dwayne, but I wouldn't say that, the comic book world still has room for me if I want in, but it's not the same place.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which is okay.
And I think I can kind of relate, because I'm also in kind of a boys' network industry where I do develop video games.
Mm-hmm.
So, I can completely relate to that experience.
Yeah, but, it's all a trade-off, isn't it? I mean, the minute you, listen, transgendered woman or bio woman, comic book business is a rough place to be.
You're right.
Mm.
It's really not it's still not a place that embraces women.
Yeah.
It's much better than it was.
Even though there's a lot of liberal attitudes, it's a lot different from tolerance to wanting to work with or wanting to be around.
I think it's a matter of common experience among the people who are running the comic book industry. They all come from very similar backgrounds. And the minute that you come out and say, I'm of a different species
right,
than
I'm different.
I'm a different type of person than you're automatically cutting some ties of commonality that you share with the majority of the industry.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
And, but that's to be expected.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot in common with the boys who are the leaders in the industry. And that's fine.
Right.
I'd like to write comics again one day, but the comic book world has kind of shrunk a little bit over the amount of time I've been in it. Because you have to remember, I've been in the comic book world since 1982.
Right.
And comics was way, way bigger when I entered than when I left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a dwindling industry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking, like I used to write the, even something as small as like the Dungeons and Dragons books that I used to write. Those would get like an audience of some 300,000 readers.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Well, and that was like an average so-so selling book.
Right.
Now your top sellers are selling about 80,000. It's a different world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not too encouraging for anyone who's trying to get into that business right now.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, it's a great business to be in. You're talking about in the 80s to 90s, it was a boom. Now it's kind of settled back to where it was before the boom.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to say that the work isn't out there. The work is still out there. But your audience is not as big.
Yeah.
Unless you hit it like major, unless you're like a Neil Gaiman or some such.
So now you've moved on from the comic industry, into more of the voice acting, and
everything in the comic world is essentially in the process of moving line.
Yeah.
I don't think paper has much of a future. Except for graphic novels and the higher prestige items. But your basic 32-page comic book is, what are they selling for now? I haven't bought one.
It's almost $4.
Yeah, between $3 and $4.
So you're not reaching kids who can just drop $1.25 for a comic book,
or a pile of comic books, or.
Yeah, I remember when I was growing up. I'd go to the comic shop with $5 and come home with 5 comics or 4 comics.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why comics sold so well then. But towards the end of the 80s, paper really, really started going up in price. And a lot of the reasons probably for Weekly World News even closing doors has to do with sales. I mean, things like newspapers.
So much content can be got for free online. So
exactly.
So, right.
Yeah, the internet's really changing the entire industry.
Well, the internet is the equivalent of cheap paper. You know, back when comic books started, paper was dirt cheap, and so the format was dirt cheap, and it was a medium that was accessible to the masses for less money. Well, you've got that same kind of feeling now with the internet. So if you want to capture that same kind of feeling of spontaneity that comic books used to have, and when I'm talking now, I'm talking even back in the 60s, you approach that better with stuff online than you can in print. In print, there's a lot of, because the expenditure is so much greater now, there's a lot of dickering back and forth, and the product winds up getting diluted. So, you know, if you're like a comic book artist just starting out right now, you're better off self-publishing on the web and finding your audience there than you actually are. This is just my opinion, by the way. These are not truths.
Well, we've certainly talked to people that have made it happen that way, and from there have been able to go on to print, or at least some sort of self-merchandising.
Well, you're always going to want print in some form because people expect it.
Right.
Yeah. But if you want to be noticed and you want to catch fire, you're better off starting off, to my mind, becoming popular on the web and then selling yourself to the print people because you'll have an established audience and they'll respect that. The risk-taking isn't as great now as it was back in the 80s. I mean, in the 80s, you could be sitting around having lunch with a bunch of people and say, hey, I got a great idea for a comic, and then, you'd know whether it was getting printed right away. That was more Marvel back in those days than DC. DC was always rather more difficult to get something into print. But Marvel Comics in the 80s was, that was like guerrilla comic book making, Yeah.
So, now
and Milestone had that same kind of energy, even into the mid-'90s.
Can you tell us a little bit about Milestone and about your experience working with them?
Milestone was a great experience. It was only the 12 or so issues a month, so it was a small outfit.
Yeah.
And it was the same kind of like high-pressure, get it done atmosphere that I really find conducive to the creativity of comics as opposed to, let's say, the slow march that, DC might have. So I don't know. Milestone was great. Milestone was I think to me, the last of the really exciting places to be in comics. Because by that time, Marvel had become very corporate, and DC was very corporate. And, Milestone was publishing some very groundbreaking stuff, and I don't think they got the attention they deserved.
And it's pretty apparent just from their from the rest of their old issues that they were doing a lot of stuff that was kind of daring.
Yeah, I would say very daring. I'd also say that in retrospect, it might have been some of that daring that made it closed shop.
Possibly, but that they did what others didn't have the guts to do.
So I'm a little bit curious about you're now doing stand-up comedy in New York. Can you tell us a little bit about your show and about what you're doing right now?
Well, really, right now, all I'm doing is learning my chops because I had never really done stand-up before. I'd done some improv work, and of course, I've done voiceovers and all. But stand-up is its own different thing. So what I tend to do now is I'm not really getting paid for doing stand-up. I do a lot of open mic nights, and I'm working out my routines and exactly who I am as a stand-up comic. But what I'm trying to do is be a stand-up comic who just happens to be a transsexual, as opposed to a drag act.
Right.
And that's a little bit rougher way to go because they expect the feather boas and they expect the sequin dresses and the heels and shit. But, I just go up there and I'm me. So my comedy comes from, a lot of the humor is from the sensibility that I'm transsexual, but I'm not doing a drag act.
And some people don't know the difference.
Pardon me?
And some people don't know the difference between drag and...
most people don't know the difference.
That's true, most. Mm.
So there's often a lot of surprise when I come out, because they don't know what to expect at first, because by appearance, if you looked at me, I just looked like, a 40-something Jewish woman from Brooklyn. And then I'm telling them that I'm transsexual, as opposed to, making it abundantly obvious by wearing a blonde beehive wig and an evening gown, because I'm coming out there in, whatever I happen to be wearing that day, T-shirt, jeans, sandals, whatever. And, It reminds me of, I had read a book by Phyllis Diller, and what it was like when she was first starting out as a female comic. And a lot of the same things are there. Now, of course, what's interesting is she actually dressed very outrageously and called attention to herself as a cartoonish figure of a woman, which is not what I'm doing. But the same sort of busting down walls of perception is there, because she was one of the early female comics, and out there by herself, not with a straight man, just doing her own thing and talking about her life experiences and making humor out of that. So the same similarity of, is there a place for me as a transsexual in the world of stand-up comedy, is there that maybe she felt as, is there a place for her as a woman in the world of stand-up comedy? So yeah, I do talk about my experiences because, they're funny to me, and I think that, at some point you really in stand-up comedy have to be talking about what you've gone through. You can't invent shit.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, I try not to be heavy about it. I'll talk about what it's like to be dating. I'll talk, the same sort of jokes that other people tell, but colored through my experience.
And do you find it kind of, your comedy, your humor kind of reverberates more with women or men, or?
Reverberates more with the women, I think.
Yeah.
At least from what I can gather from who's laughing and who's not laughing. Guys in the audience still tend to be somewhat uncomfortable unless they're with a woman. And there is, even performing in the Village in New York City, there's still an awful lot of homophobia amongst the other comics.
Yeah.
So, I recall one night getting heckled on stage by the other stand-ups in the audience. Because they couldn't, they weren't dealing well with the fact. In fact, one of them was even heckling me while they were on stage and I was in the audience.
Oh my.
So, it became a little bit tense there. But for the most part, I find other comics accept what I'm doing. But I don't know, it's just something I'm trying now because it's like something I've always wanted to do, and I'm the sort of person who doesn't see a point in not doing something that I've thought about doing, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
I think it's really great that you're out there following your dreams and just getting on stage and doing that in front of an audience. It must take a lot of courage.
It does. I just wish it paid better, or at all. Essentially I pay to go up because I have to buy a 2-drink minimum, which is bad because I'm a really lousy drinker, and I can really only get one beer down before I start becoming drunk. So I usually let somebody else have my second drink. But,
so do you have any recordings of your act available?
I have recordings that I make for myself personally so that I can get better at it, but I haven't released anything now.
Mm-hmm. Well, definitely let us know if you do get something.
The only way you can hear what I do is watching television, because I do get paid for the voiceovers, and the meow thing is over because they replaced the entire original cast after 8 years.
Oh.
With a whole new cast of sound-alikes, and that was rather depressing, but because I really loved doing the part of meow.
Yeah.
But life goes on. So I'm on a new show this fall called Dinosaur King, where I play an evil German nanny. Because I don't know why, but for some reason along the lines in voiceovers, I got typecast as playing the comedic villains.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But this is my first year in voiceovers where every single part that I have on a show is a female part. It's been drifting more to that. So, for example, I play a dominatrix ostrich on Viva Pinata. And an evil German nanny, which I don't know why I keep getting these dom parts, because I'm such a sub.
And so, I mean, would you rather play like a mix of gender characters, or do you prefer playing a female?
Oh, it doesn't bother me at all. I'll play guys, I'll play girls.
You seem very comfortable with yourself, so I could see you not having an issue with it. You seem very centered.
Well, it's a part, you know.
Right.
But, my shrink was really interested in that during my transitions. He said, you play an awful lot of male parts on television. Does that bother you? And I go, no.
Yeah.
Should it? Because she was concerned that it would affect my transition, and I was not concerned at all, because I'm able to separate what I can do as an actress and who I am. The battle in voiceovers initially was getting called in to do auditions for the female parts, because I had been doing all male parts for so long that I wasn't being considered. And now the problem is actually the reverse. Now the problem is convincing them to let me audition for male parts.
Wow.
So,
even though you can obviously do any range that you want to, as you've demonstrated to us today. So.
Well, I've got about a 4-octave range, so I can do everything. My limit is I really can't do anything younger than 12 years old, because I'm a heavy smoker.
Mm-hmm.
So I do get a kind of a raspiness in my voice that, I really can't pass for younger than 12. Right. And a lot of women can do 12-year-old boys and, or younger, but I can't get that young in my voice anymore.
Did you take voice lessons or anything like that to help you with that?
No. Transition was fairly easy for me. I found it was more a matter of shedding than I never felt like I had to now suddenly affect any kind of newfound femininity. It was more, as far as transgender people in the movies that I've always identified with, the Hilary Swank role in Boys Don't Cry. And I relate very well to female to male transgendered in general, because all growing up I really felt more like I was affecting masculine mannerisms.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so when I finally came out, it was just such a relief not to have to be affecting mannerisms anymore.
I think,
to speak in my real voice, to move like I really moved, and
yeah, I think a lot of us can relate to that, actually.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us
transition
put on an act to kind of deflect any scrutiny on us, because that's the part of ourselves we're hiding. So we try to fit in.
Right. So for me, it was I just felt like I was shedding skin.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, the old model of being a man trapped in a woman's body never made sense to me. It was more like I was acting 24/7.
Right.
So.
Did you ever have people tell you after you came out that you made such a great guy or something like that?
No, I thought that's what was going to happen. What I got was when I would finally reveal this to somebody, usually people went, duh.
Right.
Except for my family. My parents and my my siblings were all very much like, well, we never saw this, you know, blah, blah, where is this all coming from? Whereas my in-laws, you know, all the women married to my brothers all were pretty much duh. You know? So, pretty much, yeah, everybody but my nuclear family wasn't surprised at all.
Do you come from a big family, or?
Yeah, I have a twin sister, then I have a younger brother, and then I have two other younger brothers who are also twins.
Wow. And do they live on the East Coast?
Two of my brothers live in Chicago, and then my mother, my twin sister, and one of my little brothers live in Massachusetts. Like, we all came from New York, but I'm the only one who stayed.
So now, do you have any advice for young transitioners or anyone who's in the beginning of their transition as far as, like, either actually moving forward in their careers or in coming out to their family or anything like that?
You know, every case is so different.
Every family's different.
Yeah. I mean, so it's really hard to give advice based on things like, you know, what should I do in regards to where I work, or what should I do in regards to my family, because I don't know the particulars. But I will say that the biggest advice I can give is, one, don't rush yourself. Go at your own speed, and get in touch with who you are, because bottom line, it's knowing yourself is what's going to drive your success in transitioning, because you're not becoming another person. What you're doing is you're realizing yourself, and you know, that's some powerful mojo. You know,
yeah,
realizing who you truly are. But you know, geez, transition is a funny thing too, because are you ever done transitioning anyway? You know, I mean, at what point? What's the demarcation point? I mean, I've been living full time for 12 years, but I'll tell you that there's still stuff that I'm like, you know, I'm very still body conscious, and you know, I hold back on things like appearing too sexy. You know, I have problems with that because I still have fears. You know, I mean, I can pull it off if I wanted to, but more often I'm more comfortable looking like, you know, some lesbian librarian than I am, you know, because it's easier. I'm not drawing as much attention. So, you know, whereas I'm very comfortable with myself as a woman, I'm not very comfortable with myself as a sexual woman. You know,
yeah. As a sexual being.
Pardon?
I said as a sexual being.
Yeah, I still have problems with that. You know, that may just be a part of who I am. I don't know. You know, I do have a certain level of shyness about me that, you know, with the right partner it does unlock, but it does require the right partner, because I'm not very trusting still, just from years of hiding, of coming completely out of hiding. You know, there's a certain comfort level in being invisible that I still hold on to. So, you know, when does that stop? I don't know if it ever does, or if I'll look at myself in 5 years from now and it'll be different. You know, who the hell knows? But transition is never done for anybody, transgender or no. I mean, we're all in a process of growing and realizing, no matter who we are.
Right, self-actualization.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you done much dating, or are you in a relationship, or?
Currently, I'm in no relationship. Gosh, this opens up so many cans of worms. You know, I spent a good deal of my initial. Well, I spent a good deal of my initial time transitioning in a really, really bad relationship. Abusive relationship, and that ate up a lot of time. Probably accounts for why I'm a little shy. But I've dated since then. Pretty much I've dated every type of person imaginable except for straight males. I've dated gay women, bi women. I've dated F to M's, M to F's, drag queens. But I've never dated a straight male. Maybe I'll try that next.
So are you, have you done any of the surgeries or anything like that?
No. One is I don't really, I would be more likely to get SRS than I would a nose job. I'm not very trusting of doctors to begin with, and, I don't know, the whole surgery question, that's still an open book for me. A lot of it has to do with, is it something that I feel at this point that I need to do to be a woman? No.
I think that's a great point, too, because a lot of people put so much emphasis on the surgery, and in reality, the surgery doesn't make you a woman. It just is one little thing.
That's the thing. I mean, I've been living full-time as a woman for 12 years now. The surgery would be very anticlimactic. And expensive. And
no one sees the surgery, or...
Pardon me?
And generally, the public does not see the surgery or anything. It's a very private area.
Yeah, it's just, at this point in my life, it's become more of a non-issue than anything else.
Right.
Except for the fact that, to a certain extent, before one transitions, I know I did, I spent an awful lot of time and energy on thinking about SRS, and to now not be thinking about that. I remember when I finally woke up one day, it was such a gradual process, and I went, wow, it's finally happened. It's just, here I am, Maddie Blaustein. It became more of a what now? And that's when I kind of put the brakes on the ideas of SRS, because I was like, well, now, hold on, is it necessary for me to go through a complicated medical procedure in order to enforce the point that, yes, now I'm a woman? And would that make me feel more of a woman than I felt? Because I'd already felt pretty much, here I am, I'm just a woman. So, and I don't mean just in the sense of merely, but, yeah, I don't feel a drive to it. It's not something that I feel that I have to do. It would be more like something that, I don't know, I can't picture it at this point. There was a period of time where I was adamantly like, nope, I'm non-op, I'll never do that. And now it's more of I'm probably a non-op, nothing I really think about much.
It's not really on your mind right now.
Yeah, until you actually brought it up in this interview. I don't think I've thought about it for years.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I was debating about whether or not to bring it up, because to me it's not as much of an important question, because it's everyone's personal choice, and I don't think it really affects how, whether someone's a woman or not.
No, but it is a personal choice for everybody also, whether or not they feel that is what will finally kick it off and make them a woman. I mean, everybody's got that one moment where they go, okay, now I got it.
Right.
And for some people it's the surgery. For some people it's not. I don't put judgments on whether or not people get it. I'm not one of these people who go, oh my God, how horrible, you're engaging in some kind of medical mutilation. It's like, okay, you want to do that? Do it.
Right.
But like I say, I'm not even likely to get a nose job. And,
well, that's what Mila wants.
I mean, look, I'm a baby when it comes to doctors. I'll tell you the truth. I'm getting crowns put in my mouth right now.
Yeah.
You know, and I can't even stand the dentist. So.
Well, I've never had any kind of surgery, so I have to admit that I've got a little. It's a little daunting, the idea of major surgery, considering I've never had any sort of surgery. But
Mm-hmm.
And I really don't think SRS makes. I don't think that's like you're done transitioning. You're done.
You got to keep going afterwards. You still have to live as a woman.
And I don't think that's when you're successful transition, as some people contend. I just think that as a personal choice that kind of.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I would actually consider you to be a very successful transitioner, Maddie. I mean that you're integrated into society. You have a job. It's like you do. I mean, you say you do.
Yeah,
you stand up.
Exactly.
It's like,
there's nobody in my life who consider to be female. So.
Sorry, you were breaking up there for a second. Could you repeat that?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, I said there's nobody in my life who can consider me to be female. So at this point, I mean, look, I'll be honest, there are times when I'm still uncomfortable with that as a body issue. But then I think, well, all women have some body issue, it's like they could be obsessing over their ankles, I mean.
Yeah.
It's not a problem for me in any sense. Like, it's not like I can't take a shower because I can't stand to look at myself, or I'll look between my legs and think, oh my God, what am I?
Most of the time, it's a non-issue probably for most of us.
Well, more so now than it was when I was younger.
Yeah.
When I was in my 20s, that was the be-all and end-all.
Mm-hmm.
You're what, about 27, 26?
29.
Okay. So, I mean, that's like a whole different generational thing there. It's not quite as looked on as necessary as it was when I was like in my 20s.
Right, and back then it was like, you couldn't tell any of the gatekeepers that you didn't want surgery.
No, you couldn't.
Right.
No, you couldn't, or you wouldn't even get hormones.
Right.
And that's still an issue that comes up, nowadays, that if you don't act a specific way, then the doctors don't give you what you need.
Does that still go on?
Yeah, there still is. I mean, some people don't, but there still are a large number of people that we meet that have
dealt with that issue.
Yeah, they have to basically present themselves in a certain way to get their hormones.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that may be just the fact that there's still this lingering paranoia from years back.
Mm-hmm.
That, is kind of caused by that.
Yeah. And that's a big debate that's going on right now. I mean, we're kind of involved in some activism, and we have a lot of friends who go and are speaking to Congress and trying to basically get us recognized as human beings in the medical industry, and so that we're not.
You would think that it would be a basic human right to choose your own gender, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you would think so.
I mean,
yeah.
Well, you would think as an adult that you would be capable or judged capable of deciding who you are on your own. And that factor kind of contributes to my non-op status, because I don't believe that the medical community has the right to tell me what to do with my body.
I agree.
Right.
And, I even have resentment for the DSM-4. I mean, I think it's very frightening when the medical establishment can characterize anyone's personal identity as a mental disorder.
Well, that's a whole nother ball of wax, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Mm-hmm. I
find that a bit scary and Orwellian in its implications.
Well, yeah, but it's been that way since it was even defined by the psychological community. So, it's better than it's been. But I mean, if you sit down and you read Harry Benjamin's Standards of Care, it's invasive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's far more control than you really want other people to have over your life.
Yeah, it's a lot of hoop jumping.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's as if we're not capable of making up our own minds about who we are.
Yeah. Well, as long as people see it as a mental disease, then it's like, well, if you have this mental disease, then you can't make decisions, and it's like this kind of weird.
Yes, and it contributes to societal perception of who we are.
It does.
You know, I mean, that's still an issue for me when I go out, like for things like, you know, I'm currently unemployed because the Weekly World News closed the paper, so I'm on the job hunt again. What?
Yeah, and you were creative director.
I was the creative director.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did all the Photoshop pictures and, you know, helped design the new look of the paper, and but, you know, being out on the job hunt again, and facing that. I mean, when I transitioned with people I had known for years and years, and that presented its own problem. But now I'm facing a whole different set of problems, which is, you know, introducing myself to people who I've never met as, well, here I am, I'm a 46-year-old transgendered woman, and here's my experience in the field of publishing, and, you know, that's a daunting task.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there are people out there who still think that, you know, if you're transsexual, you're crazy.
Or you're an affront to God or whatever.
You know, and at times like that, I truly understand what the desire to live stealth is.
So, I'm kind of curious. So, with the Weekly World News gone, where do you want to see your career go? Do you want to see the stand-up take off, or do you think you want to go back and do more voice work, or?
I don't know. I am so up in the air right now.
Yeah.
You know.
You're a very multi-talented woman.
Yeah, I am, but that's also a curse.
Yeah. Jack of all trades.
You know, it's well, when you find yourself all of a sudden without something on your plate, where do you go? You know?
You have to
a large extent, the job at Weekly World News was a job I had always wanted to have. So that now out of the picture, and no venue for that set of skills outside of a paper like that, where does one go? And I'm looking to establish an online newspaper in the same venue.
That's great.
You know, sensationalist and fake news stories, but you know, that's kind of a hard thing to. Well, yeah, Weekly World News is fake. Yeah, we made all that shit up.
Wow. I wouldn't have guessed.
So I'm looking to establish something like that online right now, and I'm looking at you know, the stand-up, and really what I'm looking at is trying to figure out a way to coalesce everything around one center, and just, you know,
some way to bring it all together.
Market myself as me. You know, I mean, I can do some animation, and I can do the voiceovers, and I can write, and I can draw, and, you know, how do I coalesce this thing into one thing where it becomes more than just me working for other people, but me as a
commodity,
singular resource.
Right.
You know, because that's really, you know, my best bet as a transgendered woman. And I would say that to any transgendered woman, you're better off not trying to be in the box. You're better off trying to paint yourself outside of the box, because people are already going to have you outside of the box.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to truly be who you are, you know, we all grow. Any transgendered woman is by definition already thinking outside of the box. So you might as well just keep that up, because we're all, you know, breaking some big societal rules. And
social taboos.
Yeah, you know, I'll tell you, I've yet to meet a transgendered woman I didn't think was a genius.
There's a lot of good people.
Well, sure. I mean, we've met transgender women that have worked for NASA and are doctors and everything. There's a lot of very, very smart women in our community.
So we just need to pull those resources.
Yeah, but I mean every single one I've ever met, whether it's a sex worker or a waitress or whatever, every single one I've ever met has been in their own way a complete genius.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and that brings up another point is how are New York's laws like for transgender people?
How are their laws?
Yeah, I've heard they're not too, I guess, friendly as far as employment and such. There's
no, it's actually really good. New York is one of the best.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, then I've heard wrong.
Well, only within the last 3 years.
Has it gotten better?
Yeah.
Okay. That's good to know.
But it's never been bad.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the laws that you have to worry about because the laws mean bullshit. I mean, listen, if you're trying to get a job anywhere, and most jobs are employee at will,
right?
There's really there's no way to really enforce anti-discrimination laws.
Especially if you're open as a transgender person, then you're.
Well, yeah, listen, the minute you show up at the interview, look, maybe they've got to interview you, but they don't have to hire you.
Right.
Mm-hmm. If you come out on the job and you attempt to transition, most big corporations in general are actually the best places to come out and transition because they're so scared of litigious actions that it can actually work to your advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But
this is a lot of what my experience was transitioning in a large company. They were lawyers. They didn't want to get sued. So.
Yeah, exactly. And they usually generally have mechanisms already set in place and, whatever, but it really always comes down to not so much the legalities of things, but the people, individual people who you're interviewing with, who your supervisor is, your coworkers. It's never the corporation that's determining the success or failure of your transition. It's how you're dealing with people. And if you remain honest about who you are, that's your best bet at success. And unfortunately, your other best bet at success is making sure you're damned irreplaceable.
Yeah, that's something I brought up recently,
and,
I think. Make yourself
and that you're doing your job about 10 times better than anybody else could.
Yeah.
Right. Which is awful hard to keep up.
It really is.
It takes a lot of energy.
Yeah, it does. But unfortunately, that's still the case.
Yeah.
It works really well, though, let me tell you.
Yeah, it works like a charm for me.
That's something I tried to do when I came out at my my game development studio that I work for.
Mm-hmm.
I basically wanted to make sure that I was in a position where they couldn't easily replace me.
Showing up early to work, leaving late, doing extra work. It was.
Yeah. It's the oldest story. It's the same story as me. Mm-hmm. I'm sure it's the same story as countless others.
Yeah, and develop a personal relationship with the people you work for. And, if you're just another faceless employee to them, they can get rid of you a lot easier, I think, than if if they like you personally.
Mm-hmm. Boy, it's a pain in the ass, huh?
Yeah, it absolutely is.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, Maddie, this has been a really great conversation, and I've really enjoyed talking to you about everything.
Yes, I have too.
I really want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to come on the air with us.
Oh, my pleasure.
And do
really.
You have a joke to close us with, by any chance?
Oh, don't do that to me. I really don't.
All right, I won't do it. All right. We won't do it then.
Okay.
All right, thanks very much, Maddie.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.